There are people who will never forgive you for changing. Not because you did something unforgivable, but because your evolution reminds them of everything they still haven't been able to do. That's how many operate. They can't stand seeing you free from a story in which they're still trapped. So they dig through your past, blowing on it like an old wound to see if it still bleeds. But you don't bleed anymore. You just heal in silence. And precisely that infuriates them. Because your calm shows them they've lost power. They can no longer use your story as a weapon. The you they talk about no longer exists, and the one that exists now doesn't need to defend himself. That's the turning point, the moment where everything changes. Why do they do it? Why are there people who insist on reminding you of your mistakes, your falls, your old versions? Maybe because deep down they know that if you manage to rise again, they have no excuse to keep crawling. They criticize what they don't understand and attack what hurts them. But Stoicism teaches something sharper than any offense. The wise man doesn't explain, he demonstrates. He doesn't fight with words, he teaches through example. Today, you're going to learn that. To respond with calm when they try to provoke you. To keep your composure when they test you. To understand that real power no longer lies in what they say to you, but in how you choose to react. Because yes, this episode isn't about defending yourself from the past, it's about mastering it. Picture the scene. Someone, with a confident tone, brings up your past in front of others. They think that will make you small, that they can control the narrative. But what they don't realize is that every time they do, they reveal more about themselves than about you. They expose their own insecurity, their need to feel in control. And you, from a place of serenity, can see it all without feeling attacked. Because true strength doesn't come from erasing your past, but from being able to look it in the eye without fear. From being able to say, with a steady voice, yes, that was me too, and because of that, I've become who I am. That is the essence of Stoic rebirth, turning judgment into a mirror, pain into proof, and offense into wisdom. People forget that everyone carries a before. No one reaches who they are today unscathed. What happens is that it unsettles many to see that you used your ruins to build something greater. They'd rather remember you when you were down, because that made them feel superior. But you're not there anymore. And that's why they attack, because when the victim stops being a victim, the executioners lose their purpose. There are people who will talk about you as if you were still the person they remember. Not because they don't know you've changed, but because they can't accept that you've surpassed them. It hurts them to see that their opinion no longer matters, that their voice no longer defines your worth, that your name is no longer tied to shame but to rebirth. So every time they bring you up, don't stoop down to explain. Don't try to convince them you've changed. Don't beg for validation. Be like the sea, it doesn't argue with the waves. It lets them make noise while it remains deep. The people who need to remind you of your past are the ones desperately seeking what you've already found: peace. Remember this. No one can use against you what you've already forgiven in yourself. If you've made peace with your mistakes, no one can hurt you with them. If you've accepted your falls, no one can push you back into the void, because you've already learned to fall and rise on your own. That's your advantage. What others see as shame, you see as wisdom. What they call a mistake, you call transformation. So when they talk again, let them. Don't stop your journey because of the noise of the past. Let them speak. Let them tire themselves out. You're on another frequency now. You no longer need to prove you've changed. Your calm shouts it without words. And that serenity confuses more than any argument ever could, because when you stop reacting, power changes hands. Indifference isn't coldness, it's mastery. It's the art of seeing without being dragged, of listening without being caught. It's the silent victory of someone who has understood that their story isn't a weapon, it's a testimony. And if time has taught you anything, it's this: no one who truly loved you will ever use your past as punishment. Whoever does shows they never loved you, they only needed you weak. But you're no longer that version. You no longer depend on other people's judgments. Your strength doesn't come from applause or apologies. So today, as you hear these words, make one decision. Never again will you defend yourself for what you've already overcome. If they talk, let them. If they judge, let them. If they don't understand, let them stay in their confusion. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to keep growing, because in the end, time puts everyone where they belong. And when your moment comes, you won't have to explain anything. Your peace will speak for you. Your consistency will speak for you. Your silence will speak for you. And those who used your past as a weapon will end up facing their own without a shield. This is the moment you set yourself free, not from your past, but from the weight of needing to justify yourself. From now on, every word you don't say will be your victory. Every reaction you don't give will be your mastery. Every calm step you take will be your most powerful response. You've spent too much time trying to be understood. No more. The goal now isn't to be understood, it's to be respected, and respect isn't begged for, it's inspired. Respect comes when the soul becomes coherent, when your actions reflect your truth, and when your serenity becomes your shield. Because when you stop explaining who you are, others are forced to look again. And when they do, they realize something they didn't expect. They can no longer touch you. Their opinion has lost its power. Their voice can't reach where you live now. So listen closely. If someone uses your past against you, don't respond with anger, respond with distance. Respond with the elegance of someone who no longer needs the last word. Respond with a calm smile, the kind only someone wears who knows they've already won the hardest battle. The one of not having to prove anything. Your story doesn't condemn you, it builds you. And if you're here today, listening to this, it's because you already know your past wasn't a mistake, but training. It wasn't a fall, but the beginning of your rise. It wasn't shame, but purifying fire. So when someone tries to hurt you with your past, look at them calmly and think, if you really believe that defines me, it's because you haven't seen what I've become. And keep walking, in silence, in peace, in power. Before we begin, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving this in the comments. From today on, my past has no power over me. Let that phrase be your reminder that you're here to free yourself from what no longer defines you, to stop carrying guilt that no longer belongs to you, voices that no longer represent who you are. Today, we're not here to justify anything. We're here to understand, to transform, to close cycles without hatred. Because if the past still echoes in your mind, it's not because it's powerful, it's because you haven't fully let it go. This session is that step. The moment you choose peace over guilt, coherence over explanation, serenity over judgment. So say it firmly, not as someone defending themselves, but as someone freeing themselves. From today on, my past has no power over me. Without further preamble, let's begin. First, Stoic response. If you talk about my past, it's because you still haven't overcome yours. There's a truth few dare to face. People don't criticize what doesn't hurt them. When someone insists on reminding you of your mistakes, they're not talking about you, they're confessing their own stagnation. It's projection disguised as judgment. They can't stand your progress because their own lives are stuck in the version you've already outgrown. Human beings tend to point outward at what they haven't healed within. That's why when they mention your past, they're really showing you the reflection of their own frustration. They don't do it because you did something unforgivable, but because your evolution reminds them of their immobility. You changed. They didn't. And that difference irritates them, confuses them, and confronts them with their lack of courage. What the Stoic understands is that someone else's provocation doesn't deserve a defense. Every attack is an involuntary confession of weakness. When someone needs to talk about your history to feel superior, what they're seeking isn't justice, it's emotional balance. They're trying to steady an internal scale they lost long ago. That's why the wise person's response isn't confrontation, but serene observation. If you talk about my past, it's because you still haven't overcome yours. That phrase isn't arrogance, it's diagnosis. It names the invisible mechanism of resentment. Those who compare don't live, they just measure. And whoever measures your growth against their stagnation inevitably feels bitterness. They'll disguise it as moral judgment, false superiority, or irony dressed as concern. But beneath the tone lies a shadow, the inability to forgive themselves. When you respond calmly with that, disarming serenity, you hand them the mirror. You force them to see themselves, because calm disarms and silence reveals more than 1,000 arguments. Your serenity becomes a mirror so clean it reflects their own disorder. And that's the true power of Stoicism, not absolute control, but the inner mastery that turns every provocation into spiritual practice. Think about it. The great sages of the past were criticized, insulted, misunderstood. Marcus Aurelius was called weak for his compassion. Seneca was accused of hypocrisy for his wealth. Epictetus was dismissed for being a slave. Yet none of them responded with anger. They all understood that the one who throws mud ends up dirtier than the one they aim at. The wise person doesn't try to clean their name. Time will do that for them. And that's a principle you can live by. When someone attacks you with your past, don't step onto their battlefield. Don't explain, don't clarify, don't defend, just observe. Their need to speak says more than their words ever could. Behind criticism lies envy. Behind sarcasm lies insecurity. And behind contempt lies fear. The fear of not having changed. The fear of seeing that you did. The fear of being left behind. So when you say that phrase, if you talk about my past, it's because you still haven't overcome yours. You're not attacking. You're exposing a truth few can handle. You're breaking the psychological game where they needed you weak to feel strong. It's an invisible but firm boundary, an emotional frontier that says, my evolution is not up for debate. And that boundary isn't built from pride, but from self-knowledge. Pride seeks to prove. Wisdom simply knows. You already know who you are, what you lived, and what you learned. You don't need to reaffirm it every time someone tries to drag you back into the past. Calm becomes your language, composure your argument, and coherence your shield. Remember this: the one at peace with their past doesn't react when someone uses it against them. Those who haven't made peace with their own history feel anger when reminded of it. But the one who's healed smiles with understanding because they know every phase was necessary, every mistake had purpose, Every fall shaped them to stand strong in the present. The next time someone brings up your old versions, don't take it as an attack, take it as confirmation. It means you've grown so much that your past no longer fits your present, that you've evolved so far that, for some, it's easier to talk about the old you than to face the real you standing before them. Remember, nobody talks about what doesn't matter to them. If your past is still a topic, it's because your present still makes noise. And that noise is the echo of your transformation. Let them talk, let them speculate, let them whisper. It's all part of the price of change. Maturity doesn't mean staying silent out of fear. It means speaking only when it's worth it. And you're no longer here to win arguments, you're here to win inner mastery. That's the battle the world can't see, but the one that changes everything. Every time you choose not to react, you're winning. Every time you breathe and respond with composure, you're conquering. Every time you smile in the face of provocation, you're teaching by example. The wise don't need to be right, they need to be at peace. And peace isn't begged for, it's built. That's why this phrase isn't just a reply, it's a philosophy of life. It means you don't enter the ego games of others. You don't stoop to defend yourself before those still wrestling with their shadows. You don't try to convince those who don't want to understand. Life doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be conscious, to acknowledge your mistakes without letting others turn them into chains, to honor your story without living trapped in it, to accept your past without surrendering control of your present. And when you achieve that, when you can look serenely even at those who point fingers, something inside you changes forever. There's no more fear of judgment because you've realized no one can judge you more harshly than you already have. There's no more guilt because you've understood that everything served a purpose. There's no more need for revenge because you now see in others a reflection of what you once were. That's where true compassion begins, not in justifying what they did, but in understanding how blind one must be to ignore the beauty of another's transformation. So when someone uses your past as a weapon, don't return fire, return understanding. Not to save them, but to free yourself. Silence will be your best response. Your new self doesn't argue, it teaches without words. The echo of your calm will make them realize what their pride refuses to admit, that you've changed, and that change is something they still don't know how to do. Second Stoic response: that's not me anymore, but thank you for reminding me how much I've changed. There are phrases that carry such deep peace, they disarm any attack. This is one of them. Because behind those words lies acceptance, not defense, serenity, not pride, and above all, something few people ever achieve, reconciliation with oneself. When someone brings up your past with the intention of hurting you, what they really hope is that it still hurts. They hope you'll feel ashamed, that you'll react, that you'll try to justify yourself. They're looking for the guilt in your eyes that they've never learned to release from their own. But when you calmly answer, "That's not me anymore, but thank you for reminding me how much I've changed," something inside them breaks. Because there's nothing more powerful than the serenity of someone who no longer needs to run from their story. The world fears those who have forgiven themselves, because a person who's made peace with their past can't be manipulated. They can't be controlled by emotional blackmail, by the opinions of others, or by inherited guilt. They've realized that personal evolution isn't about erasing, it's about integrating. That wounds don't disappear, they transform into wisdom. When you accept your past, you free yourself from the theater of public repentance. You no longer need to convince anyone that you've changed, because you live it every day. Your consistency becomes your silent testimony. And right there, precisely there, is where Stoicism blooms, in that calm that no longer needs approval. Think about how many times you've punished yourself for things that no longer exist. How many nights you've replayed mistakes as if remorse could change them. How many times you've promised yourself never again without realizing that the mistake was the teacher, not the enemy. The soul matures when it stops seeing the past as shame and starts seeing it as training. That's the essence of this phrase. It isn't an excuse, it's a declaration of growth. It's telling the world, I've changed so much that your words can't reach me anymore. It's an affirmation of emotional independence. Those who remind you of what you did still don't understand who you are. They're anchored to an outdated version of you because they need to keep you there to feel comfortable. If they acknowledged your transformation, they'd have to accept that change is possible, and that would hurt, because it would mean confronting their own lack of evolution. But you're no longer in that war. You've learned that it's not about winning arguments, but about preserving peace. That there's no glory in responding to everything, and that sometimes true power lies in nodding with a smile and walking away. Seneca once wrote, "No man is the same 2 days in a row." Change isn't an event. It's a constant flow. Who you were yesterday was necessary, even if it embarrasses you now. What you did then, even if it seems clumsy today, was part of the road that brought you here. You can't curse the version of yourself that helped you survive at that time. You can only thank them. That's why the phrase, "that's not me anymore," doesn't deny what you lived through, it embraces it. It acknowledges that everything that came before was necessary, that even your falls were part of the awakening. When you understand this, every memory stops hurting. It's no longer an open wound, but a scar that tells a story, your story. And when that story is told from serenity, it becomes an example. Because the one who's had the courage to face their own darkness without hiding it radiates a light that others recognize, even when they try to deny it. The past only hurts when you haven't understood it. Once understood, it becomes a teacher. And the teacher doesn't punish, he teaches. That's why, every time someone reminds you of your mistakes, look at them with compassion. They don't know they're actually reminding you how much you've grown. They don't realize they're unintentionally paying you a compliment. A soul that's evolved doesn't fear memory. It knows that remembrance isn't a sentence, it's a reminder of how far you've come, and that awareness changes everything. You become immune to the manipulation of the before. You become free from the fear that someone will discover your past because you already did it first. Acceptance doesn't mean justification, it means understanding. Understanding that who you were wasn't your ending, it was your rehearsal. That every mistake, every failure, every detour had a precise function to lead you towards self-knowledge. And once you know yourself, other people's judgment loses its weight. Your change doesn't need to be understood, it needs to be lived. Don't exhaust yourself trying to make everyone see it. Not everyone has the capacity to. Some prefer to cling to your old version because it's the only one they know how to handle. It's not personal, it's fear. And when you cross paths with someone who insists on talking about your past, remember, you're under no obligation to take part in their conversation. Your silence will be their mirror, your calm, their discomfort. Because nothing frustrates someone seeking conflict more than being met with peace. That's true strength, not in the one who defends with fury, but in the one who responds with serenity. Not in the one who erases their story, but in the one who can face it without trembling. Not in the one who shouts their change, but in the one who embodies it. The person you were has already fulfilled their purpose. Don't hate them, thank them. Because of them, you endured, you learned, you matured. Because of them, you now know what not to repeat. Because of them, you've reached this point where you can look back without regret. And that, my friend, is one of the soul's greatest achievements. To be able to remember without suffering. So the next time someone mentions your past, answer with a gentle smile and say, "That's not me anymore, but thank you for reminding me how much I've changed." Because deep down, what they're really saying is that they stayed behind. And you, without saying it, are showing them how to move forward. And as you continue your path, remember, you don't need to hide who you were, because who you were brought you here. Don't be ashamed of your shadows. Without them, you would never have found the light. The wise man doesn't reject his story, he honors it. Because he understands that everything, even the painful parts, was part of the universe's order. Nothing was in vain. Nothing was lost. Everything was evolution. Third Stoic response. What I did taught me more than what you criticize. No one learns to be strong on easy days. No one matures under applause. True wisdom is born from mistakes, from falling, from that moment when you hit rock bottom and realize you can still stand up. Those who have never fallen don't understand the depth of their own spirit. So when someone judges you for what you did, they speak from either ignorance or arrogance. They don't know what it's like to face the weight of their own being. What you did doesn't define you, it taught you. Every decision, even the clumsiest ones, was a lesson your soul needed to learn. And that's something outside judgment will never comprehend, because those who observe from afar see only the mistake, not the context, not the fear, not the confusion that lay behind it. They judge the outcome without having felt the battle. They point at the act without knowing the soul that lived through it. What I did taught me more than what you criticize isn't an attempt at justification, it's a declaration of growth. It's an acknowledgement that experience is a far greater teacher than approval. Every fall you endured, every mistake that hurt, every choice that cost you something shaped a part of your character that now holds you up. The Stoics taught that pain, once understood, transforms into power. Not power over others, but inner mastery. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that mastery is learned when your own decisions reveal who you really are. Your mistakes didn't destroy you, they revealed you. Look back. Everything you did, even what you'd rather forget, was training to make you wiser, more prudent, more aware. Sometimes life doesn't teach with gentleness, it teaches through impact. It puts you face to face with your shadows so you can understand what part of you still needs light. When others criticize what you did, they fail to see the transformation that grew from that mistake. They see only the act, not the change. But you know what it cost to climb out of that place. You know the sleepless nights, the silences, the regrets that made you more human. You know the pain wasn't in vain. And that awareness marks the line between the wise and the foolish. The fool repeats, the wise one remembers. The fool blames, the wise one thanks. The fool fears falling again, the wise one trusts in what they've learned. So when someone dares to measure your worth by your failures, breathe and remember, only those who have never looked within can speak so lightly about another's mistakes. No one who has truly lived, who has faced their own abyss, would dare to judge so harshly, because pain humbles you, and humility makes you compassionate. Those who have suffered stop pointing fingers, they start understanding. Every criticism you receive can become a mirror. It shows you which part of yourself still craves approval. If it irritates you, it's because you still think your name needs to be cleared. But when you've made peace with yourself, criticism becomes background noise, not because of arrogance, but because it no longer has anything to teach you. What I did taught me more than what you criticize. It sounds simple, but it holds a quiet revolution within it. It's a statement of freedom. It declares that you are no longer the same, that you're not defined by your mistakes, but by how you transformed them, that your story isn't a record of shame, but a map of growth. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." What once stopped you now propels you. What once hurt you now strengthens you. Every criticism you hear is an opportunity to reaffirm your progress. Don't respond with anger, respond with awareness. Don't seek to convince, seek to understand. Because the truth is, no one can take away what you've learned. They can take your reputation, they can talk about you, they can invent versions of your story, but they can't erase your understanding. And that inner knowledge is the only thing that truly matters. Maybe you made grave mistakes, maybe you hurt others, maybe you failed yourself. But you also had the courage to face it and choose differently. Not everyone does. Many prefer to blame the world. You chose to take responsibility, to learn, to rebuild. That, even if unseen, sets you apart from those who only know how to judge. There is no wisdom without error, no calm without chaos first, no virtue without struggle. Those who criticize from a distance haven't yet walked through the fire of change. But you have. That's why you talk less and feel more. That's why you no longer explain, you observe. You've understood that criticism is simply the price of awareness. A strong soul doesn't seek approval. It seeks clarity. And clarity comes when you stop regretting what was necessary. Everything you lived had meaning, even what you still don't understand. Maybe that mistake you're afraid to name is what made you human. Maybe that fall you still feel ashamed of is what taught you never to stumble blindly again. So the next time someone criticizes your story, don't defend yourself, be grateful, quietly. Because every word they speak confirms one thing. You're still moving forward, and they're still looking back. You've already walked through the fire. They're still afraid to approach it. Don't let the noise distract you. The voice of external criticism fades when your inner voice grows wise. And wisdom comes only from experience, there's no other way. Those who haven't lived can't teach. They can only repeat what they've heard. But you've lived. You've felt loss, guilt, shame, and yet you're still here. That alone places you beyond judgment. You are the result of everything you've overcome, not of what you've failed, not of what they pointed out. You are the sum of your learnings. So when you say, "What I did taught me more than what you criticize," say it without anger, say it with gratitude, say it calmly. Because those words don't defend, they celebrate. They don't justify, they liberate. And when you say them, the world will feel it. Some will fall silent, others will quietly admire you. But most importantly, you'll know that for the first time you're at peace with who you were. And that peace is something no one can ever use against you. Fourth Stoic response. If my past bothers you, imagine how much it taught me. There are people who feel uncomfortable with your growth. Not because you did something wrong, but because your evolution forces them to confront what they haven't done with their own lives. And so, the easiest thing for them is to return again and again to the past. To talk about your mistakes, your failures, your wrong decisions. Not because they want to remind you of who you were, but because they can't bear to see who you've become. When you respond calmly, "If my past bothers you, imagine how much it taught me," you break the cycle of judgment. You're not attacking. You're revealing a truth that doesn't need defense. You're showing that you no longer identify with the pain, but with the lesson. What others still use as a reason for mockery or criticism has become, for you, a source of wisdom. The past, when understood, stops hurting. But when denied, it repeats itself. That's the difference between those who evolve and those who stagnate. The one who evolves doesn't try to erase their story, they honor it, because they know that every dark moment was a lesson in disguise, a silent preparation for what was to come. The one who stagnates, however, keeps talking about yesterday because they have nothing new to say about today. Think about how many times you've felt guilty for things you can no longer change. How many times you've heard comments meant to remind you of your falls. But if you look closely, you'll see those voices weren't speaking about you. They were revealing their own fear. Fear of transformation. Fear of change. Fear that your progress might prove that change is, in fact, possible. The Stoic sage doesn't get shaken by judgment, because he understands that other people's criticism is just noise from those who haven't yet met themselves. There's no blindness greater than refusing to believe in redemption. That's why, when someone throws your past at you like a stone, receive it as a seed. Let their attack become fertile ground for reaffirming what you've learned. If my past bothers you, imagine how much it taught me. That phrase has the power to end any attempt at emotional manipulation, because it shifts the focus where it belongs. To your evolution, not your error. It reminds others that no matter how painful the past was, it no longer defines you. That you walked through fire and now wear your scars as medals, not as shame. Most people can't stand seeing someone who has changed, because it destroys their favorite excuse. People don't change. You're living proof that change is possible, that the soul can be re-educated, that character can be refined through experience. And that truth, for some, is unbearable. They prefer to keep talking about your old self because it allows them to cling to their own complacency. Indifference to those voices isn't coldness, it's maturity. It's the awareness that your energy can no longer be wasted on convincing those who refuse to understand. The wise person doesn't seek approval, they seek coherence. And coherence means living in such a way that your actions speak louder than your words. Every time you remember your past with gratitude instead of guilt, you're practicing the deepest form of Stoic philosophy. Accepting reality as it was without dramatizing, without decorating, without denying. Because what was necessary. It couldn't have been any other way. What hurt had to hurt to open your eyes. What left had to leave to make room for what was coming. Seneca wrote, "The wound heals when you stop touching it. Stop reopening yesterday. Let time do its work. The lessons your past left behind haven't disappeared. They live in you. In every act of patience, in every boundary you've learned to set, in every decision you now make with greater awareness, everything you were was the soil where who you are now took root. And that's okay, even if others don't understand it. You don't need their validation. Life isn't about convincing the world that you've changed, it's about walking with the certainty that you have. That your transformation is real, even if no one applauds it. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response, because silence doesn't argue, it shows. When you stay quiet in the face of judgment, you show mastery. When you smile at mockery, you show strength. When you keep building without looking back, you show wisdom. If my past bothers you, imagine how much it taught me. Say it without resentment, without arrogance, without intent to humiliate. Say it as an affirmation of serenity. Say it as someone who no longer needs to hide anything. Because that's true freedom, not being afraid to be seen. Every mistake you made taught you something others haven't learned yet. It taught you empathy. It taught you compassion. It taught you self-control. It taught you that quick judgment is a sign of ignorance, and that deep understanding requires having felt, in your own flesh, what you now refuse to condemn. Be grateful to those who judge you. Without realizing it, they're giving you another chance to practice temperance. Every bitter comment is training for your soul. Every criticism is a gym for your patience. They think they're hurting you, but they're refining you. And when you truly understand this, when you see the distance between who you were and who you are, you'll realize there's no need to defend yourself. Because your current life is your answer. Your actions, your discipline, your serenity are the living proof of your transformation. The past, far from being a burden, becomes a compass. It reminds you of what you no longer want to repeat. It shows you the cost of unconsciousness. It forces you to choose with more precision. It teaches you to love with more wisdom, and that's something no criticism can ever take from you. So let them talk, let them interpret, invent, repeat. While they use your story for entertainment, you're using it for evolution. While they look for flaws in your scars, you're writing new chapters. While they stay stuck on who you were, you keep growing. And one day, their echoes won't reach you anymore. Because you'll have risen so high, their noise will fade into the distance. That day, you'll understand that the best revenge is peace. That the best response is your progress. That true victory isn't in proving anything, it's in no longer needing to. Then you'll look back, not with resentment, but with tenderness. And you'll whisper to yourself, if my past bothers you, imagine how much it taught me. And that phrase will no longer be a response to them. It'll be a reminder for you. A way to honor the journey, to thank the lesson, to recognize that without that past, you never would have become this version of yourself. And in that moment, you'll understand everything. The past was never a chain, it was the key. And by learning from it, you found the door that led you to freedom. Fifth Stoic response. I learned from my mistakes, did you? Few phrases are as powerful and disarming as this one. There's no shouting, no anger, no pride, just a simple question. But behind that question stands a mountain of growth, a history of faced pain, a life put in order. When you say, I learned from my mistakes, you're admitting something most people never dare to face. Because admitting you were wrong takes more courage than pointing out the mistakes of others. The world is full of people who talk about someone else's failures as if that somehow makes them purer. People who cling to your past mistakes so they don't have to acknowledge their own. But you no longer live at that level. You've understood that getting it wrong wasn't your downfall, it was your beginning. What you did wrong forced you to search for what's right, and only through error could you discover virtue. The wise don't fear their mistakes, they study them. They don't deny them, they integrate them. Because mistakes, at their core, are the sharpest tools for learning. Those who never fail never truly know themselves. Those who never err never evolve. Those who have never been broken don't know what it takes to rebuild. When you answer, I learned from my mistakes, did you? You're not throwing down a challenge, you're holding up a mirror. It's a calm way of reminding others that the perfection they parade is just a disguise for fear. That those who never admit their falls live pretending to be strong, while those who do accept them no longer need to prove anything. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's life is what his thoughts make of it. If you believe your mistakes destroyed you, they will. If you understand they shaped you, they'll make you stronger." The difference isn't in the fall, but in how you interpret it. That's the essence of Stoic thought. Events have no power on their own, only the judgment you pass on them gives them meaning. Every mistake you made was a lesson. Some taught you prudence, others humility. Some taught you that silence can be more valuable than any defense, that some goodbyes return your peace, and that certain losses are just disguised liberations. None of them were useless. None of them were random. And yet, people still fear mistakes as if they were indelible marks. They hide them, disguise them, deny them. They try hard to look flawless, when in truth the beauty lies in those who can say, "I failed, but I grew." Because a soul that dares to look at its fall without guilt or excuses becomes an invincible one. Think of the times you stumbled and thought it was the end. Today, with distance, you know it wasn't an ending, but a necessary lesson. Without that stumble, you wouldn't have learned to recognize your limits, to master your impulses, to distinguish between what you want and what truly serves you. Mistakes are the secret maps of character. Each marks a point where life invited you to know yourself better. And still, there are those who point out your flaws as if that makes them better. But they don't realize what they criticize was exactly what taught you to be stronger. They don't understand that every misstep was your teacher, not your enemy, that each mistake was one more step toward freedom. The wise seek no revenge for criticism. They're grateful for the chance to show, through their life, the distance between who they were and who they've become. So when someone tries to bring you down by reminding you of what you did wrong, look at them calmly and say silently, "I learned from my mistakes, did you?" There's no reply more powerful nor more uncomfortable for someone still trapped in their pride. Seneca said, "No man becomes wise by accident." Wisdom requires having lived long enough to err, to suffer, and to understand. No one is born wise. No one reaches calm without first knowing chaos. No one achieves serenity without first enduring the storm. So don't be ashamed of your mistakes. Be grateful for each one, grateful for those that taught you when to stay silent, for those that showed you who not to trust again, for those that forced you to start over, for those that left you with nothing because, thanks to them, you discovered you always had yourself. Error, through the Stoic lens, isn't a stain, it's a mark. It's the trace of a soul that has truly lived. The problem isn't in making mistakes, it's in repeating them, not in falling, but in refusing to rise. And you didn't refuse. You rose, you learned. And that already sets you apart from the rest. In the end, the one who learns the most isn't the one with the fewest mistakes, but the one who brings the most awareness to them. Awareness turns pain into wisdom. Ego turns it into resentment. So when someone criticizes your past failures, don't try to convince them of your growth they don't need to understand. That battle isn't yours. Your growth isn't measured by applause, but by the peace you feel when you no longer need to justify yourself. You've reached a point where your story is no longer a burden, it's testimony. Where your mistakes are no longer secrets, they're part of what makes you human. So let them talk. Let them believe they know everything about you. They don't understand that you no longer fight your past, you use it. They don't understand that every judgment they make is a reminder of how far you've come. They don't understand that their criticism is, in truth, a confession of their own stagnation. Those who haven't forgiven themselves can't stand to see someone who has. That's why their judgment is so loud. It's an attempt to silence what their conscience whispers. But you don't need to fight that anymore. You've learned that self-forgiveness is the final step of growth, and those who've forgiven themselves no longer need to fight. Next time someone reminds you of your mistakes, don't deny them. Don't over-apologize. Tell them calmly, firmly, with the peace of someone who knows themselves, "I learned from my mistakes, did you?" Because that question doesn't challenge, it illuminates. It's an invitation for them to look within, if they dare. Maybe they won't answer. Maybe they'll stay silent. But that silence will be an acknowledgement of something they already know deep down. You've changed, and they haven't. You turned your fall into a lesson, while they still fear their own. Learning from mistakes isn't a skill, it's a choice. The choice not to waste pain, not to squander experience, not to run from the mirror. And that choice, made again and again, is what makes you freer, wiser, and more in control of yourself each day. So wear your mistakes with pride, not as trophies, but as marks of growth. Because each one is proof that you chose to live, not just to exist. That you chose to feel, to risk, to learn, and above all, that you chose to keep going. I learned from my mistakes, did you? That question doesn't seek an answer. It seeks awareness. It seeks awakening. And whoever has ears to hear it will understand that it's never about who was right, but about who had the courage to face their shadows and turn them into light. If something inside you felt relief while hearing these words, follow that impulse and stay here. Subscribing isn't a favor to this space, it's a favor to yourself. It's a way of saying that your story didn't end where others wanted it to. That you're willing to keep growing without asking permission, to walk with the calm of someone who no longer fears being misunderstood. Do it now, subscribe, and share this message with someone still carrying guilt that no longer belongs to them. Because when one mind frees itself from the weight of the past, it inevitably teaches another to do the same. Sixth Stoic response. I'm not ashamed of what I lived through. I'd be ashamed if I hadn't changed. There comes a moment in life when you stop fighting who you once were. One day, without warning, you realize that looking back no longer hurts the way it used to. What once weighed you down now holds you up. You no longer hide from your story. You acknowledge it as part of your journey. And in that moment, you understand that true shame doesn't lie in what you lived, but in going through so much and learning nothing from it. Many people fear looking at their past because they believe it's where their punishment lives. But the past doesn't punish, it teaches. It's the silent teacher watching you stumble again and again, waiting for the moment you finally understand. What hurts isn't the memory itself, it's your resistance to accepting that it's over, that you can't change it anymore, that the only thing you can change is yourself. I'm not ashamed of what I lived through. I'd be ashamed if I hadn't changed. This phrase isn't spoken with pride, but with peace. It's the testimony of someone who's made peace with their story. Someone who isn't defined by their mistakes, but by their transformation. Because living means making mistakes, falling, breaking. But growing means looking at those ruins with gratitude, not guilt. Error is human, but repetition is a choice. The one who learns honors their past by not repeating it. The one who refuses to see relives it over and over again, with different faces and different settings. The Stoics taught that you cannot escape what you haven't understood. And understanding doesn't mean justifying it, means seeing clearly what was, without excuses, without adornment. It took you time to understand that shame doesn't erase mistakes, it reinforces them. The more you punish yourself, the more you bind yourself to something that no longer exists. The only way to redeem your past is to live in such a way that you don't repeat it. So when you say you're not ashamed of what you lived through, you're really saying, I no longer fear my shadow because I've learned to walk beside it. The wise don't run from their story. They carry it as a reminder of who they never want to be again. Every scar becomes a compass, every wound a warning, every fall a reminder that the soul only strengthens through impact. Seneca said it clearly. The soul is hardened by difficulty, just as iron is by fire. And you've been through that fire. You burned, you cried, you thought you couldn't go on, but you did. And even if the world still tries to remind you of who you were, you already know what you're worth. Because it's not about erasing the marks, it's about realizing that every one of them is proof you survived yourself. Shame is a slow poison. It makes you doubt your worthiness. It convinces you that you don't deserve a second chance. But life doesn't demand perfection. It demands motion. It demands learning. It demands humility to accept that failure is part of the path toward virtue. When you say, I'd be ashamed if I hadn't changed, you're acknowledging something few people admit, that staying the same is the quietest way to die, that those who don't change decay, that stagnation is more dangerous than error. Because error moves you, it forces you to look within, but resistance to change locks you into the same version of yourself over and over until life itself forces you to awaken. What's the point of pretending to be pure if your soul remains asleep? What's the use of hiding your past if it still rules your thoughts? What's the point of saying, I've changed, if every decision proves otherwise? Transformation isn't announced, it's embodied. It isn't explained, it's demonstrated, silently. Those who have truly changed don't need to defend themselves. Their presence reveals it. Their eyes carry the serenity of someone who's crossed the storm and now watches the calm sea without fearing the next wave, because they know that if it comes again, they'll know how to swim. That is the essence of true change, not forgetting what destroyed you, but learning to use it as fuel, not denying who you were, but integrating it to build something stronger, not hiding your scars, but showing them with gratitude. The world is full of those who regret, but few who transform. Regret without change is theater. Change without humility is vanity. True metamorphosis happens when you can look back without resentment and say, yes, I failed, but thanks to that, I understand now. Sometimes those who talk the most about your past are the ones who can't stand your present. Your calm, your maturity, your silence make them uncomfortable. It hurts them that what they thought would destroy you became your greatest strength. And while they keep talking about what you did, you keep building in peace. I'm not ashamed of what I lived through. I'd be ashamed if I hadn't changed. It's a declaration of autonomy, the moment when the soul stops asking for permission to exist, when you no longer feel indebted to your history, when the weight of guilt gives way to the power of purpose. Your past doesn't need to be erased, it needs to be understood. Every chapter, even the darkest, had meaning. Maybe you couldn't see it then, but now you know nothing was random. Even the biggest mistakes carried a lesson waiting to be discovered. And once you find it, everything falls into place. Remember what Epictetus said. It's not what happens to you that harms you, it's how you think about it. If you believe your past ruined you, it will keep doing so. But if you understand it forged you, it becomes your ally. The difference lies not in the events, but in your judgment of them. Don't be ashamed of having been naive, impulsive, emotional. We all were. The real shame would be never stopping to reflect, never daring to grow, never forgiving yourself. Because those who can't forgive themselves live half alive, and you are here to live fully. From now on, carry your story with dignity, not as a trophy, nor as a chain, but as a teacher. Every time someone tries to use it against you, smile, because you already know that. Every mistake you made was a lesson they haven't yet learned. The past, when seen through the eyes of the soul, stops being a burden and becomes a foundation. It allows you to build without fear, to love without guilt, to move forward without hesitation, because there's nothing left to hide, nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. Next time you feel shame, breathe and remember, there is no growth without imperfection, no wisdom without wounds, no virtue without a story. Evolution doesn't erase who you were, it transforms it. And in that quiet process, every fall becomes a hidden blessing. Don't be ashamed of your past, be ashamed only of staying the same. Because the soul that stagnates dies, but the one that reinvents itself becomes eternal. And when the world reminds you once again of what you did, don't explain yourself. Just say, I'm not ashamed of what I lived through. I'd be ashamed if I hadn't changed. And keep walking, because the one who keeps moving forward always gets the last word. Seventh Stoic response. You speak of who I was. I choose to focus on who I am. There's something profoundly freeing about reaching a point in life where you no longer feel the need to explain your evolution. Because the one who insists on reminding you of your past is revealing more about themselves than about you. They don't do it out of justice, they do it out of comfort. It's easier for them to keep seeing you as the version they once knew than to face the fact that you've changed, that you've grown, that you no longer react the same way. Authentic change is unsettling not for the one who changes, but for those who remain still. When you say, you speak of who I was, I choose to focus on who I am, you're not denying your story, you're putting it in its rightful place. You're reminding the world that life is movement, and you are not a snapshot of the past, but a process in motion. Those who keep talking about your old self don't know you, they remember you. And memory, though powerful, isn't always fair. People tend to freeze others in the moment that felt most convenient or comfortable for them. That's why, when you evolve, many don't know how to relate to you anymore. You disrupt their narrative. You no longer fit the story they built about you. But you're not here to fit, you're here to move forward. To let your growth break the molds others tried to trap you in. That's true freedom, looking ahead without asking for permission to have changed. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to us that troubles us, but the opinions we have about it." The same applies to people. What they say doesn't hurt you. It's the weight you give their words that does. If you believe their judgment defines your identity, you'll live enslaved by it. But if you understand that their perception belongs to their mind, not your reality, you're free. When someone reminds you of your past, smile not with mockery, but with serenity, because you know something they don't yet grasp. True change doesn't shout, it's embodied. It's seen in the calm with which you respond, in the steadiness of your gaze, in the quiet confidence of your steps. You speak of who I was. I choose to focus on who I am. It's a response free of aggression, but full of strength. It doesn't argue, it affirms. It doesn't deny, it redirects. It's the declaration of someone who no longer needs to prove their worth. Someone who understands that old versions of themselves aren't a source of shame, but necessary chapters in an ongoing evolution. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Each morning, remind yourself that you will meet intrusive, ungrateful, arrogant, or envious people. But none of them can harm you if you don't allow it, for they share with you the same reason, the same nature. That's the essence of virtuous indifference, to understand that. Others' judgments are not attacks, but symptoms. What they say about you reveals their level of understanding, not yours. Sometimes it's not malice, it's incapacity. Not everyone can comprehend change because not everyone has had the courage to attempt it. Many prefer to stay where they are, pointing from the shore at those who dared to cross the river. And when you do, when you risk transformation, you become a living reminder of what they haven't yet dared to do. That's why they attack you. That's why they bring up who you were. Because seeing you move forward forces them to confront the guilt of their own stagnation. And when the mind can't bear the discomfort of seeing itself reflected, it attacks the mirror. But you are not their mirror. You are your own horizon. Learn to distinguish between what deserves clarification and what doesn't. Not every judgment needs a response. Not every provocation deserves a defense. Some battles are won in silence, and some distances are conquered without explanation. The wise choose their words with the same precision. An archer chooses their arrows few, firm, and necessary. When someone tries to reduce you to who you were, look at them with compassion. Take it not as an insult, but as evidence of their limited perspective. What they call contradiction, you call evolution. What they call a change in attitude, you recognize as growth. What they label hypocrisy, you understand as newly learned coherence. No one is obligated to understand your process, but you have a duty to honor it. Don't let others' lack of understanding make you doubt your progress. The mind that seeks approval becomes weak, but the one that seeks coherence becomes unshakable. Seneca said, "The highest sign of wisdom is the consistency between what one thinks, says, and does." That balance only comes when you stop trying to prove your change and simply live it. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't argue. Those who are willing to understand will do so without words. Those who aren't willing never will, no matter how many explanations you offer. Remember, truth doesn't need defense. It stands on its own. People can talk about your past, but they can't alter your present. They can judge your mistakes, but they can't erase your lessons. They can repeat your story, but they can't write your next chapters. And that's what hurts them most, the fact that the power of what's next is entirely in your hands. Don't waste your energy trying to clean your name in mouths that enjoy dirtying it. Clean your mind of the need to be understood. That's the only ground worth working on. Because once you understand yourself, you no longer need to be explained. You speak of who I was. I choose to focus on who I am. Repeat this phrase as both shield and prayer. Not to protect yourself from the world, but to remind yourself that your attention is your most sacred resource. Wherever you place it, it blooms, and you're no longer watering the past. Authentic transformation doesn't look for witnesses. It doesn't crave applause. Sometimes it happens in silence, unseen by anyone but the soul knows. And that's enough. Because each wiser thought, each calmer reaction, each day without resentment is an invisible victory. So let them talk about who you were. You keep building who you are. Every calm step you take, every word spoken with reason, every fearless decision you make will be silent proof that change is real. And when they bring up who you were again, smile, not out of arrogance, but gratitude. Because without that old you, the current one wouldn't exist. And because you understand that we're all just in different chapters of the same search to be better than yesterday, In the end, the wise don't seek to erase the past, they seek to transcend it. They don't seek approval, they seek authenticity. They don't seek recognition, they seek freedom. You speak of who I was. I choose to focus on who I am. And in that phrase lies a quiet invitation to everyone still living in the past. Stop revisiting the wound and start writing the scar. 8th Stoic response. The past doesn't chase me, I've tamed it. There's a vast difference between running from the past and making peace with it. The first is fear, the second, mastery. When you say, the past doesn't chase me, I've tamed it, you're declaring that what once hurt you no longer controls you, that what once made you tremble now teaches you, that you no longer live defensively, but with command over your story. Most people don't tame their past, they hide it. They cover it with work, with relationships, with distractions. They believe that if they ignore it long enough, it will disappear. But the past doesn't dissolve in silence, it grows stronger. It seeps into your thoughts, your fears, your reactions, until you finally face it, until you take it by the reins and teach it not to dictate your steps. That's what the wise do. They don't run. They don't forget. They don't deny. They observe. They understand. They integrate. What once wounded them becomes a mirror. And when you dare to look into that reflection without running, the reflection loses its power. The past doesn't chase me, I've tamed it. This phrase doesn't sound proud. It sounds balanced. It's the voice of someone who no longer needs to defend their story because they know every fall shaped them. Every person who left pushed them toward their center. Every mistake became a seed of wisdom, not a mark of guilt. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whatever happens, happens as it should. If you observe carefully, you will find this to be so." That line captures the essence of this truth. Accepting the inevitable is not resignation, it's understanding. When you realize that everything that happened, even the unjust, had a purpose, your past stops being an enemy. It becomes a silent ally, reminding you what you're made of. The past only chases those who fear it. But you don't fear it anymore, because you've learned that what hurts isn't what happened, it's what you refuse to accept. Every time you resist a memory, you bind yourself to it. Every time you embrace it, you set yourself free. Taming the past isn't about erasing it, it's about turning it into wisdom. Think of a wild horse. At first it throws you, drags you, wounds you. But once you learn to understand it, to respect its strength and rhythm, it stops being a threat and becomes a companion. That's how it is with your story. When you stop running from it, it starts walking beside you. Life spoke to you many times through pain, but you were too busy defending yourself to listen. Until you finally understood that pain didn't come to punish you, it came to shape you. That you weren't a victim of your past, you were its student. And from that day on, fear lost its power. A tamed past doesn't disappear. It's still there, like a controlled fire, warm but not destructive. You use it to light your path, not to burn yourself. And every time someone tries to rekindle those ashes with judgment, all they see is your calm, and they can't understand how you achieved it, because few know what it costs to reach that peace. To face your own shadows without fleeing, to acknowledge your role in every wound. To forgive yourself truly, not as someone who forgets, but as someone who understands. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The same is true of the past. It's not what happened that hurts, it's how you keep interpreting it. See it as a sentence, and it imprisons you. See it as a teacher, and it frees you. Taming the past is an art. It requires patience, introspection, and silence. You can't achieve it by reading books or listening to comforting quotes, but by facing what hurts until it stops hurting. It's a process no one can do for you. A journey that begins the day you stop running from your own reflection. The past can't chase you once you accept it. It simply can't, because what you accept dissolves. What you resist repeats. What you understand integrates. That's the natural law of the soul. Everyone reaches a turning point, a moment when the past stops being a burden. It might come after loss, after error, after betrayal. That instant when there's nothing left to explain, only to understand. When you finally say, yes, that too is me, but it no longer defines me. And something changes. You feel a lightness you've never known. Not because you've forgotten, but because you no longer need to remember with pain. You realize the past was never your enemy. It was your most honest mirror. Everything you lived was preparing you to become who you are now. The wise don't fear memory, they honor it. They're grateful even for the wounds because they know those were the bridges to maturity. They understand that without chaos there would be no order. Without darkness, no appreciation for light. Without falling, no strength to rise. When you've mastered your past, you stop trying to erase your footprints. You start focusing on the path you're creating. You no longer need others to understand your decisions because you already understand your reasons. You're no longer affected by what people say because you know they speak from their level of awareness. You're no longer afraid of being judged because the one who's forgiven themselves needs no external absolution. Seneca wrote, "The wise man does not grieve over what he doesn't have, but rejoices in what he does." And you have what's most valuable, awareness. Awareness of your story, your process, your power. The past only dominates the unconscious. For the awakened mind, it walks alongside. Don't apologize for your evolution. Don't be ashamed of who you once were. That version was necessary. It carried the weight, endured the guilt, walked through the noise until it found silence. Without that former self, the one who breathes calmly today wouldn't exist. So when someone tries to use your past to unsettle you, respond with serenity. The past doesn't chase me, I've tamed it. Say it not with arrogance, but with gratitude. Because those words aren't a defense, they're a declaration of freedom. You've walked through darkness and returned with light. You've known guilt but chosen awareness. You've felt shame but learned forgiveness. That's why what once hurt you now strengthens you. And when you walk from that peace, life no longer feels like a battlefield, it feels like a landscape. One you observe with serenity, knowing that every stone on the path had a purpose. The tamed past isn't forgotten, it's transformed into wisdom. It no longer shouts, it whispers. It no longer wounds, it teaches. And in that quiet whisper, you find your true freedom. The past doesn't chase me, I've tamed it. And those words aren't just a phrase, they're a way of living. Ninth Stoic response. Your opinion belongs to your mind, not my life. We live surrounded by opinions. They pierce us, judge us, measure us, and label us. Most people don't speak to understand, they speak to impose. And without realizing it, if you're not vigilant, you can end up living more in other people's minds than in your own. Every word, every criticism, every look of disapproval becomes an invisible brick that starts building the prison of your soul. But there comes a breaking point. One day, tired of pretending, you realize something as simple as it is liberating. Other people's opinions are not truths, they are interpretations. They are projections of their history, their wounds, their fears. And that day, when you finally understand it, your true freedom begins. Your opinion belongs to your mind, not my life. This phrase is not a defense, it's a boundary. It's the calm limit of someone who has understood that other people's minds are not territories to inhabit, that their energy is too precious to waste explaining the inexplicable. Marcus Aurelius summarized it perfectly in one of the most powerful lines of Stoic philosophy. We live only in the present, and yet we allow what doesn't exist, the past and the opinions of others, to rule our spirit, because that's what we do. We hand over the helm of our peace to the fleeting judgments of others. When you live depending on what others think of you, you fracture. Every comment tears off a piece of you. Every look makes you doubt. Every criticism steals a bit of your power. And the worst part is that, in that process, you disconnect from your essence. You stop acting from virtue and start acting from fear. The wise, on the other hand, seek neither approval nor battle against judgment. They transcend it. They know that the mind of another is an unreachable universe, that each person perceives reality through the lens of their own consciousness, that what someone sees in you doesn't speak of you, it speaks of the filter through which they see. Epictetus taught, "It's not what others say or do that disturbs you, but the opinion you hold about it." So when someone judges you, the real impact doesn't lie in their judgment, but in your reaction. If it offends you, it's because you believed it. If it hurts, it's because you doubted yourself. But if you remain calm, the judgment dissolves because it has nowhere to attach. The mind of the wise is like a polished surface. Nothing sticks to it. They listen without absorbing, observe without reacting, understand without becoming entangled, because they know that their inner peace is worth more than any attempt at external validation. It's not about being indifferent out of pride, but out of balance. Virtuous indifference is a form of respect for yourself and for others. It's saying, "I understand that you think that way, but I don't need to adopt it as my own." It's recognizing that everyone has the right to their perception, but also the duty to protect their serenity. Your opinion belongs to your mind, not my life. Say it without anger, without resentment. Say it like someone lighting a candle in the dark, because there's no greater peace than the one that comes from no longer fighting to be right. Think about how many decisions you've delayed out of fear of what others might say. How many words you've swallowed, how many dreams you've left unfinished. All because of the opinions of people who don't even live their own lives fully. People who judge from a distance but lack the courage to do what you do. And when you see it clearly, when you understand that no one truly focused on their growth has time to judge you, something ignites within. A calm, a clarity, a voice that says, "I don't need to prove anything, I just need to keep walking." The world will always talk. They'll talk if you fall, they'll talk if you rise. They'll talk if you change, and they'll talk if you stay the same. They'll talk if you dare, and even more if you succeed. But you weren't born to silence others, you were born to speak when wisdom calls and stay silent when peace requires. Remember what Seneca said, "He who cares not for the opinion of fools cannot be disturbed by the wise." It's not arrogance, it's mental hierarchy. It's about choosing who gets access to your mind and who doesn't. Don't exhaust yourself trying to clear your name in the wrong mouths. It's a futile battle because every mind interprets through its own fog. Truth isn't imposed, it reveals itself over time. And time is always on the side of those who act with coherence. Next time someone criticizes you, don't defend yourself. Observe. Listen just enough. Ask yourself if there's something valuable to learn. If there is, thank them. If not, release it, but never carry it as a burden. Every judgment is a stone thrown by someone hoping to see you stumble. But the wise use those stones to build their path. That's the difference between one who reacts and one who transcends. Your serenity is your greatest argument. Nothing disarms more than a calm soul facing provocation, because silence isn't emptiness, it's controlled strength. And the one who can master themselves amid the noise has already won the hardest battle, the inner one. Today's world, obsessed with opinions, has forgotten the value of silence. We live surrounded by external voices, yet few listen to their own. That disconnection makes us vulnerable, dependent, anxious. But when you return to your center, you become immune to chaos. Not because you don't feel, but because you've chosen peace over approval. Your opinion belongs to your mind, not my life. It's a phrase to whisper whenever external judgment tries to drag you away. You don't need to say it aloud, it's enough to think it. It's a reminder that your life only flourishes when watered by your own convictions. Imagine what would happen if every time someone voiced an opinion about you, instead of reacting, you simply smiled and continued. Not out of indifference, but out of wisdom. You're protecting your energy, your time, your direction. You're consciously choosing which battles are worthy of your soul. The wise don't fight to be right, they fight to be calm. And in a world so loud, that's the highest form of rebellion. So let them talk. Let them interpret. Let them discuss a story you've already outgrown. Time will reveal what your words never need to explain, because coherence doesn't shout, it lives. And when you live with integrity, the noise becomes irrelevant. Your opinion belongs to your mind, not my life. And with that phrase, you free yourself without fighting, distance yourself without hate, and affirm yourself without shouting. Because the soul that doesn't depend on others' approval is the one that truly knows peace. 10th Stoic response. If you believe my past defines me, then you haven't yet learned to look beyond. There are those who live with their eyes fixed on the timeline of others. They look back, review, judge, repeat. And they do so believing that such observation makes them wise, when in truth, it only makes them prisoners of their own blindness. Because anyone who cannot see beyond another's past has not yet learned to see their own present. When someone reminds you of who you were, it's because they can't comprehend who you've become. Not because you haven't changed, but because their vision is stuck in the place where you stopped being that person. And that distance between who you were and who you are can't be explained, it's demonstrated. It shows itself through calm, through maturity, through the peace with which you now walk. If you believe my past defines me, then you haven't yet learned to look beyond. This phrase is a declaration of inner independence. It's the invisible boundary separating the wise from those who still haven't realized that every human being is a process, not a photograph. Life isn't a gallery of frozen moments. It's a continuous flow of transformation. Epictetus said, "A man is not what happens to him, but what he chooses to become through what happens to him." That's the essence of this truth. What matters isn't what you were, it's what you did with what you were. Not the falls, but how you rose from them. Not the mistakes, but the wisdom you extracted from them. Those who fail to grasp this will keep trying to use your story as a weapon. They'll say, you haven't changed, that you're pretending, that you're exaggerating. They do it because someone else's change confronts them. Your evolution reminds them of their stagnation. Your peace irritates them because it exposes their own disorder. But you are not here to prove anything. You are here to live with coherence. To look at your past without shame and your present without fear. to be grateful for every stage, even the darkest, because those were the ones that forged the clarity with which you now see life. Those who haven't learned to look beyond see only mistakes. The wise, instead, see the intention behind them. They see the lesson, the fire that purified. That's why they don't fear being reminded of their past. It no longer belongs to them as a wound, but as a lesson. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way." And your past was exactly that, an obstacle that became your teacher. What once felt heavy now propels you. What once hurt now instructs you. What once was ruin now serves as foundation. Many people fear their past because they haven't yet understood it. You have. You learned to speak to it. You gave it a voice and listened. You discovered that behind every mistake was a search. Behind every pain was a need. Behind every failure was a seed. When someone can't see beyond, it's not your duty to open their eyes. Don't waste your energy trying to convince them. Understanding cannot be forced, it must be reached, and only those who are ready will see it. Seneca put it clearly. The man who masters himself depends neither on praise nor blame from others. That's why when someone still judges your past, you look at them with compassion, not superiority, but wisdom. Because you know that once, you too were blind. You too believed the past was a sentence. Until one day, you realized it was a school. And that day, everything changed. You learned that every time someone reminded you of your story, they were giving you the chance to show that it no longer hurts. That you no longer react from the wound, but from awareness. That you no longer live to erase chapters, but to write new ones. When someone can't look beyond, what they're really confessing is that they can't look within, and you can't live waiting for them to. Your task isn't to convince, it's to keep growing. Your serenity will be their mirror, your consistency, their lesson, your silence, their discomfort. Because a soul at peace with its story doesn't need to raise its voice. Its very presence radiates steadiness, clarity, and truth. If you believe my past defines me, then you're reading the wrong map, because I don't live there anymore. I've learned to say goodbye to my old versions without hate, to thank them for bringing me here. I don't reject them, I honor them, but they no longer represent me. There comes a time in life when you stop fearing the judgment of others, not because you don't care about anyone, but because you finally care about yourself. And then the outside gaze ceases to be a cage and becomes mere background noise. Every human being has the right to change, to rebuild, to heal, but not everyone is ready to watch another do it. That's why many will judge you when you start to heal, not because they don't believe in you, but because they can't bear what your healing reflects. That they could, too, but haven't dared. Your growth unsettles them because it breaks the story that kept them comfortable. Because seeing you advance takes away their excuse that no one really changes. But you're living proof that change is possible. So, when someone tries to use your past to bring you down, don't fall into the trap. Don't lower yourself into resentment. Don't explain, don't argue, don't correct their vision. Just keep walking. Because time, like water, smooths every stone. And in the end, truth always finds its way to shine. The wise don't rush to be understood. They know every mind moves at its own pace. Every soul awakens in its own time. And anyone who can't see beyond your past simply isn't ready to see the greatness of your present. So let them talk. Let them look back while you move forward. There's no greater lesson than a living example, no greater victory than peace, and no greater show of strength than continuing to grow in silence while others remain in criticism. If you believe my past defines me, then you haven't yet learned to look beyond. Say it calmly, not as a defense, but as closure. Elegant, serene, absolute. Because when you no longer need to prove your change, the change is complete. Your life isn't measured by who you were, but by who you chose to become after being that. And that after that new you is something no one can ever take away. When the past stops hurting, true freedom begins. There's a moment almost imperceptible when the soul realizes it no longer hurts. You don't know exactly when it happened, but one day you look back and discover that what once kept you awake at night now only awakens gratitude. That's when you understand that healing was never about forgetting, it was about understanding. All your life, you believed that freedom meant escaping from pain, from judgment, from memory. But now you know it doesn't. Freedom isn't outside, it's within. It's not about erasing the past, but about looking at it without your voice trembling. It's about recognizing that every wound was a doorway, and crossing it changed you forever. For years, you carried the belief that you needed to explain yourself, that you had to prove you had changed, that you needed to convince the world you were no longer the one who failed, who fell, who got lost. But the world is never convinced by words, it's convinced by presence. And you, by remaining steady, silent, and consistent, have already said everything that needed to be said. Silence, which once felt heavy, has now become your sanctuary, because you've come to understand that the external noise cannot disturb the calm of someone who truly knows themselves. That no offense can shake the soul that no longer reacts from a wound. That when someone tries to judge you, they're really revealing themselves. People talk about the past of others because they can't bear to look at their own. They do it to avoid confronting their own reflection, to avoid the emptiness they refuse to fill with truth. And while they talk, you keep moving not to prove, but because you've realized that every step forward is an act of forgiveness toward yourself. If you believe my past defines me, then you haven't yet learned to look beyond. That phrase isn't a defense, it's a closing statement. It's the moment you let the sword fall and walk in peace, knowing your greatest victory was not becoming like those who condemned you. Seneca once said, "No one can harm you without your consent." And he was right, because pain doesn't come from the judgment of others, it comes from the interpretation you give it. You were vulnerable only while you believed you needed approval, but the moment you stopped asking permission to be who you are, the wound closed. Now you no longer live to convince, you live to understand. You no longer seek to be right, you seek to be at peace. You've stopped trying to control how others see you and learned instead to care about how you feel. Because someone's opinion may change with the wind, but inner coherence remains like stone. Your past didn't disappear, it became landscape. It's there, but it no longer dominates your horizon. It's a shadow walking behind you, reminding you where you've been, but no longer steering your path. You carry it, yes, but as a teacher, not as a sentence. And when the past becomes your teacher, the soul matures. It learns to give thanks for what it once rejected, to understand that nothing was a loss, only preparation. That yesterday's emptiness was the space needed for today's wisdom to fit. There's something profoundly beautiful about reaching this point, the day when you no longer rush. The day when the world can keep talking and you keep breathing calmly. The day when you discover you don't need to be understood to live in peace. That day, freedom ceases to be a concept and becomes a state. It doesn't depend on anything or anyone. It has no witnesses and needs no applause. It simply is. And then you realize that everything that once hurt served its purpose. That every loss, every betrayal, every mistake stripped you of what was unnecessary. That loneliness wasn't punishment, it was purification. That judgment wasn't a chain, it was a test. And thanks to each of those trials, you can now look at the world without resentment. Because a soul that has suffered and understood no longer seeks revenge, it only seeks silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but of inner peace, the kind that doesn't need to be heard because it's complete simply in being. What hurts me instructs me, wrote Marcus Aurelius. And you are living proof of that truth. Every wound was a lesson, every fall a reminder, every dark night a call to awaken. Now you understand that true repentance isn't hating what you did, it's choosing not to repeat it. That true maturity isn't about not crying, it's about not fleeing from tears. That true forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's giving thanks for what you learned. Your past was the fire. Your present is the temple you built from its ashes. And every word you now speak from calm is a silent prayer to the power of rebirth. You don't need anyone to understand your story. You don't need to be believed or validated. The awakened soul seeks only one thing: coherence. Coherence between what it thinks, feels, and does. And when you achieve that, life aligns itself. Those who hurt you may still not understand. Those who judged you may still be talking. But it no longer matters. Because justice isn't found in their recognition, it's found in your awareness. In living from the serenity that only truth can give. In the end, we are all chapters in someone's memory. Some people remain in your story only to remind you who you never want to be again. Others to show you what's worth protecting. But none of them have power over you if you no longer identify with the version of yourself they remember. Your task is not to erase your past, it's to turn it into legacy. To let your story inspire, not imprison you. To walk with your head high, unafraid of the shadow behind you, because even the shadow is proof that there's light somewhere within. And perhaps that's the deepest lesson of all. That light is not something you search for, it's something that reveals itself when there's nothing left to hide. When you've made peace with every part of yourself, even the ones you once denied. Because what truly defines a human being isn't their story, but their awareness. Not what they lived, but what they learned. Not what they lost, but what they chose to keep. So when you look back, don't look for guilt, look for meaning. Don't search for what went wrong, search for what bloomed. Don't ask why it happened, ask what it transformed within you. And if someone ever tries to remind you of who you were, smile. Because while they speak of the past, you're already writing the future. A soul free from the judgment of others walks lightly. It doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be true. And in that truth, there's a beauty that can't be explained, only felt. Perhaps, after all, that's what freedom really is. Living without fear of being remembered, because there's nothing left to hide. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds, a community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.